The group behind the attack at the gas plant in Algeria is known as the Signatories of Blood Brigade. Its leader is a one-eyed jihadist who has vowed to target Westerners. It's a threat one Canadian man knows all too well.
On a quiet morning in January 2013, dozens of armed men stormed the In Amenas gas plant in Algeria, one of the country's most important energy sites. Workers barely had time to react before they were taken hostage. The mastermind behind this was a man named Mokhtar Belmokhtar. He was already a warlord, a smuggler, and a terrorist. But this attack was different. This was meant to send a message. They wanted Western forces out of Mali. They wanted power, and they thought no one could stop them. But Belmokhtar had made a mistake. Algeria's military responded with force, ending the crisis in bloodshed. 39 hostages died, the plant lay in ruins, and Belmokhtar became the world's most wanted man. Belmokhtar thought he was making a statement. Instead, he had signed his own death warrant. Gardaia, the town where Mokhtar Belmokhtar was born in 1972, sits deep in the Algerian Sahara, surrounded by golden sand dunes and ancient stone buildings. Life in Gardaia was simple, but unforgiving. For generations, people had survived by trading in the bustling markets, growing date palms, and adhering to deep-rooted Islamic traditions. It was a town where boys followed the same path their fathers and grandfathers had walked before them, learning the Quran, helping with family chores, and dreaming of a future that rarely stretched beyond the town's sun-baked streets. For most, that was enough. But for Belmokhtar, it wasn't. As a child, he was quiet, blending in with the other boys at religious school. He memorized verses, said his prayers, and did his chores. On the surface, he was like any other boy in town. But inside, there was something else, a hunger, a restless energy. He was fascinated by the stories of warriors. He listened as elders spoke of men who had fought for their faith, carved their names into history, and died for a cause greater than themselves. He imagined himself among them. At 19 years old, he made the decision that would change everything. He left Algeria behind and traveled thousands of miles across continents and war zones. His destination was Afghanistan. Afghanistan, however, was nothing like the stories he had heard. It was a land torn apart by violence, where warlords ruled, and survival depended on loyalty and brutality. Here, he was introduced to the world of combat. He learned how to handle weapons, how to move through mountains undetected, and how to strike with precision. He trained under hardened fighters, men who had spent years on the battlefield. During one of his training sessions, something happened that would change him forever. Accounts of what exactly took place vary, but one thing is certain: Belmokhtar lost his left eye in an explosion. Some say it was during an attack. Others claim it was an accident involving explosives he was handling. Whatever the cause, the injury left him permanently marked. The men around him began to call him the One-Eyed, a name that would follow him for the rest of his life, a name that would soon strike fear across continents. By 1993, Mokhtar Belmokhtar was no longer just a young man searching for purpose. He had been hardened by war in Afghanistan, trained in combat, and shaped by the ideologies of radical jihadists. But the world he returned to in Algeria was nothing like the one he had left behind. The country was in flames. A brutal civil war had erupted between the Algerian government and Islamist rebel groups, a conflict that would claim over 200,000 lives. The roots of the war traced back to 1991, when the Algerian military canceled an election that an Islamist party was poised to win. This sparked outrage and led to the rise of armed Islamist groups determined to overthrow the government. Among the most feared of these groups was the Armed Islamic Group, GIA, a faction known for its ruthless tactics. For Belmokhtar, joining the GIA seemed like the natural next step. He was young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself as a warrior. The GIA was unlike anything Belmokhtar had experienced in Afghanistan. In the mountains and deserts of Algeria, the group fought a relentless guerrilla war against government forces, launching ambushes, assassinations, and bombings. But what truly set the GIA apart was its sheer brutality. The group did not just target soldiers and politicians. It slaughtered civilians, murdered journalists, and wiped out entire villages suspected of collaborating with the government. They used terror as a weapon, killing in the most gruesome ways to send a message. Heads of victims were displayed on spikes, and families were massacred in their homes. At first, Belmokhtar was a loyal soldier, carrying out attacks and rising in the ranks. He was good at what he did. His experience in Afghanistan made him a valuable asset, and he quickly earned a reputation as a fearless and ruthless fighter. But as time went on, he began to question the group's leadership. The GIA was no longer just fighting the government. It was tearing itself apart from within. Internal power struggles led to executions of members accused of betrayal. Rumors spread that the Algerian security forces had infiltrated the group, using spies to manipulate its actions. Belmokhtar realized that staying with the GIA was a death sentence. If he wanted to survive, he needed to leave before it was too late. In 1998, Belmokhtar made a bold move. He turned his back on the GIA and helped found a new group, the Salafist Group for Preaching and Combat, GSPC. Unlike the GIA, which had spiraled into chaos, the GSPC had a clear goal: to target government forces while avoiding senseless civilian massacres. This shift won support among jihadists who saw the GIA's brutality as counterproductive. Belmokhtar, always thinking ahead, recognized an opportunity. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a businessman. He knew wars aren't won with guns alone, but with money, connections, and influence. By the early 2000s, the GSPC was growing fast, recruiting fighters and expanding across North Africa. But Belmokhtar had bigger ambitions. He didn't just want local influence, he wanted to be part of something global. In 2006, the game changed. The GSPC merged with Al-Qaeda, rebranding as Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM. This wasn't just a new name. It was an open allegiance to Osama bin Laden's global jihad. For Belmokhtar, it was the perfect move. Tying himself to Al-Qaeda gave him access to an international network of fighters, weapons, and money. It elevated him from a regional warlord to a key player in global terrorism. Under AQIM, his operations expanded, his attacks became more high-profile, and his name landed on international most-wanted lists. But Belmokhtar wasn't just a militant, he was a hustler. He knew ideology alone wouldn't fund his war. The real power came from crime. The vast Sahara, with its unguarded borders and centuries-old smuggling routes, became his playground. He didn't invent the game, he just played it better than anyone else. He started with cigarette smuggling, moving truckloads across the desert and earning millions. This lucrative trade earned him the nickname Mr. Marlboro. But cigarettes were just the beginning. Soon, he was trafficking and blood diamonds, working with powerful criminal networks. Cocaine from South America flowed through his routes into Europe, while conflict diamonds funded his growing empire. Yet, there was one business even more profitable than diamonds or cigarettes: kidnapping. And that's where Belmokhtar truly became a legend of terror. Belmokhtar figured something out early. Smuggling took constant effort, endless movement, and the risk of losing shipments. But one well-planned kidnapping, that could bring in millions with just a few phone calls. Western tourists, aid workers, and diplomats traveling through the Sahara became his goldmine. Their governments would pay anything to get them back. His biggest breakthrough came in 2003, when 33 European tourists made the mistake of thinking the Sahara was a peaceful adventure. Men ambushed them in Algeria, turning their dream trip into a nightmare. Blindfolded and shoved into trucks, they were taken deep into the desert, where they endured months of brutal conditions, scorching days, freezing nights, and the constant fear of execution. Belmokhtar demanded $10 million. Governments publicly refused to negotiate, but behind the scenes, deals were made, a ransom was paid, and the hostages were freed. Just like that, he had made a fortune. And once he saw how easy it was, he never stopped. Over the years, he orchestrated dozens of high-profile kidnappings, targeting French, Italian, Spanish, and Canadian citizens. Some were released after payments, others were executed to send a message. Kidnapping became his signature move, cementing his status as one of the most feared criminals in Africa. But power attracts enemies. Governments, intelligence agencies, and even rival jihadist leaders saw him as a problem that needed solving. His empire was thriving, but his downfall was coming. By 2012, Belmokhtar had built a criminal empire, but inside Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, tensions were rising. He wanted more control, but AQIM's leaders saw him as too independent and too reckless. They wanted someone who followed orders. So, in true gangster fashion, he walked away and started his own crew, the Signed-In Blood Battalion. Loyalty was non-negotiable. You were either in or you were dead. In January 2013, Belmokhtar pulled off his most infamous attack, the one that put him at the top of every most wanted list. His men stormed the In Amenas gas facility in Algeria, a major energy hub. Heavily, they took hostages and rigged the site with explosives. Their demand was that Western forces had to leave Mali, where French troops had just launched a military intervention. For days, the world watched in horror. Governments scrambled, Algeria's military prepared to strike, and inside the facility, hostages lived a nightmare. When Algerian forces stormed the plant, it was a death. 39 hostages, multiple attackers. The facility was left in ruins. It was one of the deadliest hostage crises in history. It showed just how powerful Belmokhtar had become. But it also put a giant target on his back. The In Amenas attack made Belmokhtar one of the most wanted men on the planet. Intelligence agencies, Western governments, and African militaries all had one goal: take him out. But instead of hiding, he went bigger. In 2013, he merged his group with another militant faction, forming Al-Murabaitun. This wasn't just another gang, it was a terror empire launching deadly attacks across West Africa. Under his command, hotels, bars, and restaurants, dozens. Meanwhile, his smuggling network kept the money flowing. Belmokhtar wasn't just a jihadist anymore, he was Africa's biggest crime boss. Belmokhtar became infamous not just for his attacks, but for his ability to survive. Every time the news declared him, he'd resurface, leading new attacks and mocking his enemies. In 2013, the French military claimed they had him. He proved them wrong. In 2015, a US airstrike in Libya reportedly took him out. Again, nobody was found. No proof, rumors spread. Was he or just lying low? Years passed. The world moved on. Then, in 2021, Al-Qaeda's leader Ayman al-Zawahiri confirmed it. Belmokhtar was finally. But how? When? Where? No one knew for sure. With Belmokhtar gone, his empire crumbled. Al-Murabaitun was absorbed into larger jihadist factions. New crime bosses took over his smuggling routes. The warlord who once thrived in chaos had disappeared into the shadows. His wasn't the dramatic showdown some expected. No final battle, no grand last stand, just silence. For years, he haunted the Sahara. But in the end, even Africa's most feared gangster couldn't outrun fate.